It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
The Creole Seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole Seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports
Tell everybody
Network.
they can follow their dreams. It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 404-758-2881. Do you miss your mama's cooking? Then come on down to Q Time, an Urban Passport member.
This is Brian Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
The Creole Seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole Seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports
Tell everybody
Network.
they can follow their dreams.
YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today, how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that swag, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. Just tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Cavil.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. The team is back together again. Boy, it's so nice to have my fraternity brothers with me and live and ready to go, man. Mike, where you been, Mike?
Man, I've been on the road here, there, over yonder. So this week I am in Baltimore, Maryland, on business, but my son is traveling with me. We are with Nation United. It's a collegiate exclusive camp for lacrosse players. So happened to have a sit down talk with Chaz Woodson, head coach of Hampton men's lacrosse, and a couple of other African-American lacrosse head coaches in my off hours, but was able to parlay this with a business trip. So life has been good. I'm tired. I'm on the road, a little groggy, but other than that, I'm happy to be back with you fellas.
No doubt about it.
Welcome back.
We're going to wake you up. Go ahead, Charles.
Welcome back, good brother. Welcome back, man.
I appreciate it, CB.
Charles look like he got that Asian look on his face. I don't know what it is. I've seen that look before. Welcome back.
Yeah, yeah, Charles looked like he got something hidden. What he's about to bring out.
I wish.
Charles, how you doing since you lying and grinning? And what you got? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Dr. Cavil. It's we're in that little period now of HBCU sports where it's a little lull, but there's still enough to chew on and whatnot. So it's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
No doubt about it. Talking about a little bit of the Southland getting heads over the heels a little bit. It's never a dull moment, like you said. Well, welcome to episode 145 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora. All things HBCU sports for the institutions large and small. From the NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, and to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and the sending of signal live to our KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. With that being said, let me jump in here with the first one that I want to jump off. Usually, I go to you all and say, what's on your mind? This one is intriguing to me because it's about NIL, name, images, and likeness. But there's the connection with that HBCU, specifically Howard President Dr. Frederick, and that is Dr. Wayne Frederick, will serve as a chair of the MEAC, who actually serves, I should say, as the MEAC President and Chancellor's chair. He will be in front of the United States Senate in a hearing of NIL in college athletics, and that is Wednesday, June 9th, tomorrow, in Washington, D.C., as you imagine, it is the capital. The hearing titled NCAA Athletes NIL Rights will be chaired by Senator Maria Cantlin, a Democrat of Washington, chair of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and will address federal legislation proposals to allow student athletes to monetize their NILs, improve athletes' health care, enhance scholarships, protection and academic outcomes, among others. I'm intrigued about this. We've heard this and we've jumped right on it. When the announcement came way back in California a year and a half ago now, because this was pre-COVID, when they jumped to the forefront and said that they would be signing states legislation that allow athletes to take advantage of the NIL, I should say, their national, their name, image, and likeness, as we cut it down short to NIL. But they said that they weren't going to jump on it until 2022. Then you seen some of the other states, New York, and then all of a sudden you started seeing some states in the South. They pushed forward. Florida was out there in front, Georgia with their rules, which was just a shame the way they put it out there in so many different ways. That like they were really helping and supporting something when they find the fine print, 70% plus of the money goes back to the institutions that they wanted. I was like, oh, you just circling around it. But anyway, you have the nature of capitalism in America, which is going to change in a lot of ways how they start to compete against each other. So you saw several states enacting the rules as soon as 2021, immediately, this July. So now you see from a federal legislative level, it'll be interesting to see. So Dr. Frederick is among 6 witnesses scheduled to speak in a slate including NCAA President Mark Emmert, Gonzaga University head men's basketball coach Mark Pugh. You have statement from the commissioner, Dr. E. Thomas. So I want to get your thoughts on all of this, including the commissioner, Dr. Thomas's thoughts. Quote, the MEAC presidents and chancellors have been in discussion with congressional members to ascertain the prudent pathway forward in the best interests of student athletes, FCS institutions, and HBCUs. He continued, quote, we wanted our collective voices to be heard regarding federal legislation proposals. We are elated that Dr. Frederick will continue to articulate the MEAC's position at this hearing, end quote. It is a live video of the hearing, which will begin at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Obviously, that would be 9 o'clock Central, and it'll be available on www.commerce.senate.gov for us to watch and ascertain and see really what they're saying. I'm gonna go to you, Charles, to get your thoughts. That's a lot to unpack right there.
Yeah.
But I want to get your thoughts in any area that you want to look at it. What are your thoughts on this announcement in this hearing that's coming as early as tomorrow morning?
Well, it'll be kind of interesting to see what the federal legislative proposals are, because just looking at it from what some of the states have already done, you touched on it, I think, with Georgia. Athletes taking advantage of the NIL legislation. To me, that would be difficult if you kind of left the states to determine the amount of compensation or how they'll be compensated, because we already see Georgia has reverse engineered it back to Georgia. So it'll be rather interesting to see what sort of federal oversight that they can put forward in regards to helping athletes with regards to being compensated. And it's about time. I mean, we've looked at athletes now as quite honestly employees versus student athletes over the past how many years. So it'll be very interesting to see what sort of federal legislation comes forward that can really help athletes.
No doubt about it. I think great points you make. I like the way you said that, reverse engineered. Mike Washington knows a little bit about engineering and the reverse part of it, even though I'm not sure he does a lot of the reverse, usually ahead of it with his strategic thought process. So let's hear what Mike says when he comes down on what this means in terms of the name, image, and likeness. Is there going to be a significant change, a lot of change, little change, no change, really? What are your thoughts when it comes to the table? How important is it to have an HBCU president such as Howard on board to look at this?
Yeah, I think it's important on a couple of fronts. First of all, I think CB makes a good point. Putting my 2 years of law school hat on, and it's a common and old historical debate legally with a newer issue. It's states' rights versus federal rights. Who has oversight? When we talk about interstate commerce, business that transacts between states, such as game competitions, California teams versus Georgia teams, who has who has jurisdiction? Is it the federal government or is it the state? And when you're talking name, image, and likeness, these athletes are a part of that business model. So that's an interesting debate. Are they going to go on past precedents where they say when we're dealing with interstate issues like this, or are they going to go with Senate Bill 206 in California, which they've said they've already put that in play, and you saw what Georgia did. And as CB said, they reverse engineered. They kindly took 75% of the name, image, and likeness and put it in an escrow. You can't get some of it until you graduate. So states have also employed it in different ways. So that increases the complexity of it. So you have states doing it their different ways, but you don't know who's going to have jurisdiction. So this is a lot of wheels moving at the same time, and you don't know who's who or what's what. I think it's one other point. I think it's important to have representation from HBCUs because of how we represent our athletes may differ from how others represent their athletes. So it's important when you're talking about speaking on behalf of the employees that you have representation from all different cultures, all different areas and regions of the U.S.
Great point there. Charles, did you want to jump back in there with some follow-up thoughts? That's all you
the regionality of what each state is doing. I mean, like, especially when we take a look at these athletes here in the South. What are these red states? How will their legislation look in regards to athletes, especially with the number of African Americans that are concentrated in the South? How different does it look than California, Arizona, or even in Big Ten country, in Midwest? It'll be very interesting to see what kind of comes from some sort of federal oversight.
The other thing also is when you have these bills like this in the states, there are attachments to each of these bills that we don't know and may not know of. And if you allow this the regionality approach and the state approach, you don't know what attachments come with that bill, what endorsements, what behind the door backshapes are taking place from a legal standpoint. All you're hearing is that Senate bill here, this bill in Georgia. We know that Florida is doing some things. We know a couple of other states are doing it. But if you allow the states to do it their own way in the regionality, there's backdoor deals, and there's also going to be a group potentially left out, as CB put it, red states, blue states, majority or states that have lower variability in terms of diversity. You're going to have some groups that are underserved and underprivileged. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see how this thing works out.
No doubt about it, man. Great thoughts from both of you all in terms of unpacking this from a different perspective. So I appreciate that. I'm going to stay with you, Mike. Are there some things out there that in terms of the HBCU land that are hot on your mind that you think we should put out in front of the listeners and viewers to opine a little bit? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, some of these coaching changes, and I don't know how late I'm with. I mean, you've seen some coaching changes with FAMU. We'll hopefully get to that one. But UAPB has also removed the interim tag from Chris Robinson. If you look at the years, and I don't want to just give that as news. My question is, we always put this interim tag on folks. And if you look at the job, look at the history he's done, why do we put the interim tag on there for a certain amount of time? Why not just interview him? There was a search committee that was formed. He was chosen. And, rightly so, he's done a great job. I think he'll continue to do a job. But why do we spend money to bring a search committee in when we have someone in the ranks waiting and we put that interim tag on individuals for a period of time? I understand it may be warranted in certain circumstances, but it seems to me we do that quite a bit. So, but congratulations to him on becoming the new athletic director for University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. From my perspective, well deserved. If you look at his resume, and if you look at his track record, and you look at the latest improvements of UAPB. But my question is this interim tag, and is there a standard on how we apply it when we're looking at placing new coaches or potential head coaches or new directors or potential head directors? So those are just my thoughts.
That's a good question because I guess my same question is the interim tag some sort of stopgap measure to kind of slow the process down a little bit so that you don't rush into a decision and you let, whatever skeletons fall out or whatever the case might be. So that's a good, interesting thought process in terms of how the interim tag is used.
No, I agree with you, Charles. And Mike, you bring up a great point in regards to how do you really define the interim? What does that look like? And I would say that it varies pretty much from institution to institution. So if we go back, for example, and look at Alabama State, you haven't really heard about an interim in place. And it looks like they went straight to a search to find out how they're going to move forward. Unlike what you've seen with Pine Bluff and previously Prairie View, the interim tag stayed on the individual for essentially a year. And they took a deep dive in the process, and the interim had the ability to obtain the job. But you've seen it both ways. And I think we got to be careful from the standpoint, it's not only how do you define interim, as you talk about the legislative right, this is where this is similar again. Based on each state, they may have a different framework of the guidelines of how a state institution has to do a search and how they do interim. Because some people will use interim, some people will use acting, and oftentimes they use them interchangeably. They could be different in terms of the terminology they use from institution to institution based on a state requirement. And so those are things that you consider. Sometimes when you put an acting, for example, you have to go do a search versus an interim at some point after you put it out there. In some locations, some state institutions, the interim can be removed by the president de facto. Obviously, the board approves it, but you don't necessarily have to do a search. But in a lot of places, you can't just name an individual the head of a department without getting the approval of the board. And the board requirements, for example, that they may be like 21 days. I think there's something similar with the presidential search they're doing at Texas Southern University, where there has to be a 20-day open window by the state to do whatever necessary. And then you can ratify the name, even though you have sole finalists, pretty much everybody has agreed this is going to take place, but the state requirements don't allow you to move forward. So your point is very important in terms of understanding terms and what they may mean or may not mean. So that's fascinating when you bring that up. I'm gonna go to you, Charles, on that same nature with some of these new hires. FAMU did the extension, including Willie Simmons, extending for 3 years. You see the interim tag removed from the AD at Pine Bluff. So you see a little bit of Delaware State appoints E.C. Hill to the head women's basketball coach, is another one that's out there in terms of these moves. They also, remember, they were looking for a men's basketball coach. So they did the prep hoops direction where they go with Stan Waterman, who was a legendary First State High School coach and administrator of USA Basketball and former college player, has been selected as the head men's Delaware State University basketball coaching position. So in terms of that, any of these stick out to you? Anything that is intriguing about these moves, as we see a lot of this taking place in terms of either new hires right after these retirements? Some took longer in terms of the searches, while you have some interim tags or some extensions going on. So a lot of movement in this quasi, what as you led into this, Charles, off season, a lag to some degree. What are your thoughts on any of those or all of them?
Yeah, well, the FAMU one kind of stood out for me in terms of with Florida A&M coming into the SWAC, and now they've more or less set their coaches for their initial foray into this conference, and you kind of get that baseline of this is what it's going to be, and this is how it's going to be for the next few years. So it sets sort of the foundation of what the recruiting will look like for Florida A&M in terms of having your coaches all in place, football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. Stan Waterman hired Delaware State was curious or interesting to me because of his extensive work with USA Basketball and his proven track record along the high school ranks. The first name that kind of popped in my head was Wayne Brink. Had a similar sort of resume where he was tremendously successful in the high school ranks in Mississippi and was able to parlay that into the Jackson State job. So very interested with regards to Stan Waterman becoming Delaware State's head basketball coach.
Man, I appreciate you making the connection in terms of another coach that came from the prep ranks out of Mississippi, as you said, Wayne Brent. And we've seen that he's had some success. He's never really bombed out. You know, people may have wanted him to have a little more success at the top, and he solidified that this year in terms of going undefeated along with Prairie View A&M University, going deep into the tournament semifinal, and played literally a classic game. That game was anybody's game. So it wasn't like while they did not win it, anybody that watched the game knew that you had two talented teams. And obviously Texas Southern getting it done in the championship game gives you an indication a play here or there could have saw Jackson State winning it that close. Obviously, that's not how the history books will remember it, but I'm just saying in terms of the credibility of the coaching and what he's been able to transcend to, and kudos for him to be able to do that. So I'm fascinated with that framework as you put out there. Also, in terms of the coaching, it's going to be interesting.
Quickly, give me the lineups so I can put them in.
Interesting in a lot of ways. Right. Looks like as we get a little bit of
I'm on Jennings
with Truth coming in, probably trying to pipe in a little bit about his thoughts on some of these hires. So just want to
give me the name,
get him in there. So with that, let's see about moving forward in terms of your thoughts on the mix-up there. So I'm gonna stick with you, Charles, and see what your thoughts are and any other discussion that you think we need to go in there before we look at taking a break.
Well, you know, I thought HBCU Game Day, they did a tremendous write-up on Edward Hurt. And, you know, I'm a football, I love HBCU football history. And he has, again, been placed on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot. And just to, you know, take a snapshot of what he was able to do for Morgan State back in the 1930s and 40s, when you take a look at what he was able to do from 1931 to 1938, he never lost a game. So, and it was a very interesting read, especially when you take a look at HBCU football history. A lot of times we hear Eddie Robinson, and we sometimes, you know, miss the Edward Hurts or the Ace Mumfords or so many other legends that were around, especially in the 30s and 40s, this golden age of HBCU football. So hopefully, you know, he finally is able to go into the College Football Hall of Fame.
Good point.
No doubt about it. I'm glad you brought him up. Go ahead, Mike. I want you to jump in on here because I'm gonna
just to build on that. I had heard of the name, I had heard of the record, but I just wonder sometimes, are we a victim of being in our own generation that we miss the great legends like this? You know, here's another example. You know, never went this period of time, never lost a game, long overdue for accolades and for Hall of Fame acceptance. But, you know, I just think there are so many examples that, you know, just because we're in this age of football, it's different. We play the game a little bit different. It's coached a little bit different. The approach may be slightly different, that we have missed the recognition of a bunch of legends. So I can't I don't want to gloss over that fact that we are talking about. And kudos, you're right, CB, to HBCU Game Day on a tremendous piece. They really did him justice with that piece. But it just hurts me that we miss so many legends because we become a victim to the generation that we're growing up in. And not that that's bad growing up, but we just tend to overlook so many legends.
And, you know, Dr. Ville, I think you pointed out with regards to Prairie View's coach in terms of his head-to-head record against some of the legends during that time. Which,
Billy Nix,
you know, it made me think about this article. So.
Yeah, you said it and took the words right out of my mouth. I'm so glad you brought that up. As you said, wonderful job, Steve gave the HBCU Game Day. He always finds a way to find some hidden gems or bring some comments out, and he did it with this one. And to do it at a great timing, because Brian and myself co-authored an article that talked about the dynastic coaches in terms of HBCUs, and he was included on there. Obviously, we focused on Gaither and Billy Nix.
Billy Nix.
Yep.
In regards to that looks, and then the legendary Eddie Robinson. We focused on those coaches, and they tend to be out front. But as I like to say, when we talked about the Greensboro Four, if you go back and you start talking about some of those legendary coaches in terms of Tuskegee, in regards to what that looks like, there is this hidden history, and unfortunately, it's hidden. but it's in plain sight oftentimes when you just take some time to read and look at it. I know Fred Whitty would be all over this in terms of what he talks. Shout out to Fred in terms of what he's doing to make sure that we collect this history in so many different ways. But I have this, what I call this golden age. And I say the golden age is that 50s and 60s, and some people may even take it to the 70s, where you had this explosion of HBCUs that were able to play in these desegregated championships between NAIA and NCAA. NCAA Division II for the most part during that time. And these HBCUs finally got a chance to show their talent, and they literally dominated the landscape in terms of basketball, bowl victories, if you would, Division II basketball championships. We've heard about those, those runs in the tournament from Jackson State to what they're doing, being one of the first HBCUs ever to play in the NCAA Division II. Obviously, with Southern winning with the baseball championship, the only HBCU to do it. The multiple championships that you've seen from Prairie View, Grambling, and the NAIA, Texas Southern to cap it off in terms of the window of what you've seen there. The Howard University Soccer Championship, when you talk about some of these programs. Yeah. So it was multiple levels. The great run by Morgan State with their lacrosse program, to bring back up what Mike was talking about earlier. Obviously, they didn't win a championship, but they were perennial in terms of what they were able to do with their new program, which was so unique and different in terms of those runs. The championship by Division II at the Alabama A&M for men's soccer in terms of what they're able to do. So a plethora of women's basketball championships run. So those things are marquee, and you have the coaches that register in a lot of ways. But people before 50, right, when you talk about these programs from late 1800 for the first HBCU programs playing in the 18s, specifically when you see these conferences starting up in CIAA in 1912, SIAC in 1913, the SWAC in 1920, the Midwestern Conference in the early 40s in terms of their accumulation of playing and what took place there. You don't necessarily get that. And I got to make sure I talk about John McClendon in the Tennessee A&I. I'd hate to leave him out with his championships, record-setting 3 in a row. But the point is those coaches that before the 50s, unfortunately, they tend to get left out when you start talking about that Greensboro 4, the top of the crop. It's easy for most folks to name their 2 and 3, right? And some will find that 4th one, but oftentimes they are not about those coaches that are pre-1940. So it's good that we have a chance to bring them up. They Coach Long, Wiley College, in terms of those legendary coaches. And some of the great coaches from Billy Nix, if you think about it, Southern's coach in terms of Mumford. Yeah, they started at the smaller HBCU NA programs before they and really solidified names with these public HBCUs. So even think about those private schools that are able to do that.
I'm always curious about the research, especially everyone who's written with regards to HBCU history, where they're pulling from, because you can't always find it via Google. It only goes back so far. So, Fred Whitted, yourself, everyone who has sort of put this history into some sort of chronological order, I'm so appreciative of the research that you have done, because you can go 3, 4, 5 pages back into Google and just not come across the scores or the stories. Or I've spent time, just researching old Pittsburgh Couriers, just looking at articles. So it's very appreciative for all that work that has been done.
I appreciate it. And now we got so many people putting it in books, as you see back here. But you're right. One of your best suppositories of that, I should say, of that information is in your Black newspapers. Obviously, one of the most popular ones was Pittsburgh Couriers. But oftentimes, if you want more regional information to take the deep dive, then you have to go to some of those more local and regional statewide Black newspaper, Negro newspapers, as they said at the time, that really will take you back there. As we, did the Ben L. Cavil Senior Football Award. A lot of that was done based on the research from those magazines. And in case of him, It also went to the Sphinx magazine, just to throw that in there a little bit, which is fascinating to find the correlation between being a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and what he did on the gridiron in terms of that time. So let's take a quick break. This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We'll be right back after this quick break, and we'll bring it back and break it down some more and see what other information we get into. I want to see if we can get into it. I want to get your thoughts on this Southline information that was out there and how quickly it was debunked. But I'm going to take a deeper dive and really go into some nuances that people may not know about the information out there in terms of the conferences. I want to see your thoughts on that. So stick with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
There's a shot. It might be. It could be. Right field. Grand slam. What a shot. That's how you get hot, young fella.
Thank you, guys, for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do, and all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
This is Dr. Cavil's inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. I got both of the brothers back in the studio. This is hitting hard and heavy, man. We're getting into some of this information. As I promise you, we will get to the Southland. But I know a lot of people were expecting A&T's, North Carolina A&T's men and women's track and field head coach Dwayne Ross. Reached out to Brian Holloway. There's a mix-up in terms of the timing. Obviously, they in the Pacific on the West Coast, if you would, as they hopefully are preparing to bring home some championships. And so the time got displaced, but we're working on getting that, and we should be able to have him next Tuesday after the NCAA championships. Hopefully he'll be coming back talking about how they won some championships, and hopefully in some ways maybe the whole doggone thing. So I did want to give people some updates of why you're not hearing the interview with Dwayne Ross. We had scheduled it. It was sanctioned and everything, but the schedule got off. A little bit of the travel threw us off in terms of the time difference. Threw some people off, but we'll work on it. We'll get it done. You know, things happen, and we'll get into some comments about track A&T in a little bit. But I wanted to do this with the Southland Conference in terms of what went out there. It was amazing to me as this kind of filtered out about how many people, or a few people, I should say, because it wasn't really many. Kudos to all those HBCU folks that were like, no, we have a lot of positive momentum with the Southwestern Athletic Conference, with expansion. Let's move forward. We teased last week, obviously, that Neely, to his credit, got a lot of bandwidth out of his comments in regards to New Edition and FAMU coming into the SWAC in terms of what that meant. But without further ado, jumping back to that, one of the things that I thought was fascinating is how many people didn't know the facts associated with the Southland Conference and how they thought this may be a good move. Most people was like, no way, who would have dismissed it. And we since have now had a clarification, obviously, with Prairie View A&M, Dr. Reed coming on the Open Mic Network, saying that no, this was not the direction Prairie View was going into. You had the AD presser that came out, I guess, that on Twitter, speaking that the interviewed or talked with two ADs from the SWAC and saying that they had no interest, they didn't know where this was coming from, that they didn't put it out there. But one of the things I did want to put out there is a chance to educate some people. First of all, there's a reason why the teams left the Southland. Let's start there. I mean, you have your biggest branded institutions, larger enrollment with the Texas institutions, including Sam Houston State, that literally just won the FCS spring version of the championship, along with Lamar, Stephen F. Austin, as well as Abilene Christian, leaving the conference, going to the WAC. And they talked about the lack of support they thought that the other institutions were making, mainly the Louisiana institutions were making towards the athletic program. And they wanted to go in a different direction. So I thought that was interesting in terms of what was going on there. So wanted to put that out there. Central Arkansas left for the Sun Atlantic. You got the OVC that I talked about, teams leaving, going to the Sun Atlantic, Atlanta Sun, which is obviously Eastern Kentucky, and as well as Jacksonville State, which are going to join two schools that were partnering with the Big South, leaving there in terms of North Alabama, as well as Kennesaw State. So you got all these mixing, all these turning, but folks talking about running somewhere else. The other thing that I thought was important that I wanted to put out there is that this Southland Conference does not pay its member institutions a distribution fee. I want you to think about that a little bit. So you think all this stuff out there, the SWAC does play a distribution fee. They call it a conference fee that they split among the members, since they pay that out. Check this out, in terms of basketball. Going to the Division I tournament, the basketball tournament, NCAA, where you know the conference gets set amount of money, $1 million plus over so many years, 6 years, and they get that. In terms of that distribution, the Southland doesn't play its institution that goes to the tournament and represents the conference. They get zero money. People don't realize to go to the tournament, the NCAA requires that each institution spends and buys 30,000 tickets. It's similar to what you saw the previous commissioner do with the SWAC championship game. And that's a different conversation in terms of buying those tickets. You got to obviously pay bonuses to your coaches that have it written in the contract. So if you're not getting any money, that means it's costing you. Think about it. It's costing you to represent the conference to go to the NCAA tournament based on all the money there. The SWAC has a setup where they actually write a check to the institution that it represents that. So there's a fee, and it's over $100,000. You want to check it out? Go ask the commissioner. He'll tell you. I'm just giving you facts and information so you can decide what you want to do on your own. This is not including the Division I playoffs. People don't realize that the playoffs, or they heard it, but people snap back at you and talking about, that you have some components where you want the media attention, but you have the bowl game that's going to pay you $1 million. This MEAC SWAC challenge that paid these institution almost $500,000 in regards to what's going on. But you're going to go to the playoffs where they're going to charge you to have a host game on the same weekend of Thanksgiving, where the majority of your students and fans in the area are going home or traveling for their family Thanksgiving weekend. So that lets you know that the FCS doesn't really care about the FCS programs in the playoff, because they never would do that to the FBS programs. In fact, they kick it off and push them all the way back to traditional Christmas as well as New Year's to make sure that they can get the biggest fan base possible, so that they don't even care with the NCAA. The membership fee to join the Southland Conference is higher than the membership fee for the SWAC. Yeah, so not only do you not get any money from the Southland Conference, your membership fee to join the conference is higher, but this is supposed to be a smart business move. Think about that. The Southland Conference pays for its ESPN Plus deal. They pay to get their games on television, as well as the other regional deals. They pay for that programming, while the SWAC has a deal with ESPN that literally writes a check to the conference or directly to the team to put its games on television. And I'm not even talking about the Celebration Bowl, the MEAC SWAC Challenge. This is written check. Now, you can talk about and saying that maybe this needs to increase, and that's what Charles is working on, but it's a difference between one needs to increase and one is charging to do it. So that's something to think about there in terms of that. The travel argument, talking about you're going to reduce your travel. You act like since 1999 that the conference hadn't split in division. The only teams that travel is basketball, in regards to two teams traveling to reduce the cost. And plus, you don't pay per mileage for your bus. In fact, some of the schools have their own bus. So you paying for the person that drives who's already on salary with the school. And if you're renting a bus, you pay for a destination, not exact mileage. So saving 100 miles, 50 miles is not going to make a difference when you're only traveling in the Western Division this year. You're only traveling to Louisiana. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where you're going to travel for the Southland Conference. Oh, and in Arkansas. Oh, yeah. All right. The travel really changes when you look at, hey, get out of here with these folks that don't even take the time to do the research and see what's going on. But I put a pin on it. So you can add anything you want, but hopefully I can drop the mic and pass it on. Charles, go ahead.
Well, I think you laid everything out, Dr. Cavil, but what always interests me, especially when you look at social media and chat rooms and things of that nature, is there is still a segment of the HBCU population whose eyes bulge when they hear, movement or potential movement of an HBCU team to a historically white conference. For whatever reason, it generates, some sort of excitement, if you will. And I can never quite figure it out. I can figure it out. Let me tell you. Since you're going to ask the question, let me tell you. It's what you call the proximity to whiteness. The critical race theory that they're trying to ban, that we're running from, then we say don't ban it. But some of y'all probably agree they need to ban it because you don't even believe in your own historical framework. So yeah, it's the proximity to whiteness as the property norm. You see whiteness as greater than blackness, period. You can't run from that when you dissect this, because when you put pen to paper and do the math, it makes no sense. And people, you will share that and they will still argue with you and try to make up things. When you tell them the facts that no, this doesn't make sense. I didn't even get into the academic reputation of these institutions. The MEAC and the SWAC have more academic reputation. And this is based on the Carnegie classification that started back in the 70s. I didn't even make the classification up. I'm not just talking about something I dug up and want to believe that there's more programs. I'm talking about the Carnegie classification that puts a tag on doctoral research institutions and the best ones out there. When you look at conference institutions to institutions, they don't even measure up when you talk about the other low major, mid-major programs at the FCS level. I'm not talking about FBS. I'm talking about the conference that people are talking to go to. They don't match up. We have more doctoral research institutions in the MEAC than you do the SWAC. You have more in the SWAC than you do the Southland Conference. You have more than in the OVC. In fact, as of 3 years ago, when I did the research, the only doctoral Carnegie classification institution in the OVC is an HBCU, it's Tennessee State. But most people would tell you that the academic pedigree of the rest of the valid, not according to a measure. And this was done by the whiteness property norm. So if you're going by that, they tell you that. Since you believe in what they say so much, you go to the big style. Now, if you just go in there and that's the direction you want to go, have at it. You're reducing your travel, but don't try to tell me it's about some academic stuff, because I know the Carnegie classifications. I looked at it and I reviewed it, and you map it 1-to-1. It's not even close. It's not even close. So no, it's the whiteness of property norm, and we need to share it so people can quit running from it and act like it doesn't exist. It's real out there. And unfortunately, we have two people that are still mesmerized by it. Let me drop it again. Let me go with Mike and see what Mike wants to say and help me get out of this hole out in Doug.
Oh, man. I can't even add. You dropped the mic and Charles put an I on the dotted the I. I guess I heard this and I'm like, where and why? First, let's look at it from a value proposition. Why do 4 teams in their 34-year reign to leave this Southland Conference to go to the WAC? What's the WAC doing? They're positioning themselves to be an FBS institution. These teams are going there. Why would teams in the SWAC go there? They have everything they need. The only battle you talk, well, maybe there's a head-to-head battle that garners a lot of attention. The only battle is the Battle of the Piney Woods between Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston State. They're taking that to the WAC because they can't get what they want from the Southland Conference. They want it to one day probably be an FBS matchup. So why would these teams go there to take the matchups that are already solidified, already garner the attendance, and oh yeah, we already got a bowl game. So why would they go there? Just think through this a little bit. It's cultural, it's common sense. Where do the matchups go if you go there? And this notion about travel, really, do the math, really. You going to Louisiana? There's folks that go to Louisiana every day if to work. There's no savings there. So there's all kinds of holes in this. And if 4 teams are leaving their 34-year reign to go to the WAC, this mass exodus to the WAC, why would 3, 4, whatever teams from the SWAC go to this bottomless pit known as the Southland Conference when you have to pay really more money than you're earning to enter the Division I playoff system? What kind of sense does that make? What kind of value? If I presented that to a business manager or a director or a VP, do you know I'd be thrown out the office? Wait a minute. You want me to go here? I got to pay, write a check, and I may go to the playoffs. I may not. There's limited exposure, and you want me to go here? What kind of business proposition and valuation statement does that make? Just think through it. It's simple math. It's simple common sense. So that's my only perspective on it.
Oh man, no doubt about it. And then we didn't even get into the point where you talk about facilities. The upgrades and facilities that's been done through the SWAC, and many people will tell you, you have Nickel State, who still has people changing outside in tents, the visiting team. But you running over there and you talking about these facilities here and there. Miss me with all that in regards to what's going on there. So just wanted to give a little information in terms of what that looks like in terms of that. And the term that you want to use if you're going to talk to people about it is CDA, Conference Distribution Allocation. That's what the SWAC provides its institution. And it continues to get bigger as more companies are supporting the SWAC because they see the value proposition in the cultural relationships with all the institutions having the classic games right here in the SWAC, momentum in terms of Jackson State with Coach Prime, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman coming in, splitting it up in divisions. They actually mapped out the schedule so you wouldn't have Texas teams going across, taking trips to Alabama and Florida at the same time, or vice versa. The farthest east teams having to worry about going to Arkansas or Texas. They fixed it in such a way when you look at the schedule that you don't double book those trips. So they made sure the travel time was reduced, as if you don't have commissioners and associate commissioners that are smart enough to consider these things before they make the decision in terms of expansion. So it is really irritating me in a lot of ways, as you can see. So that's enough of that. We can change it and go in a different direction in terms of what's on your mind as we move forward. I did want to talk a little bit and get your thoughts, if you would, in terms of North Carolina A&T and the multiple honors from Track Association, specifically as HBCU Game Day talked about again. You have Coach Ross capturing his 4th and 5th career Coach of the Year honors from the United States Track and Field Cross Country Coaches Association, USTFCCCA, as the organization named Ross the Men's and Women's Southeast Region Coach of the Year. Big deal there. Ross's 5th senior, Trevor Stewart, earned Southeast Region Men's Athlete of the Year. So just accolades. Sophomore, Cambria Sturgis secured Southeast Region's Women's Athlete of the Year. Ron Gardner secured the USTFCCCA Men's Assistant Coach of the Year. So they're getting it done in multiple layers. And so kudos to A&T, the Aggies, in regards to what they're able to do, and the fact that they're getting acknowledged for it means that much more. Let me stick with you, Mike. Any comments that you want to jump out there in terms of A&T? What do you think they'll be able to do this weekend in nationals? Do they have a shot at a national championship? And in terms of some of the records, will they have a shot at any of the records, whether overtime or current stadium records? New, so you got a chance for that in terms of what that looks like, as well as some individual particular race championships. Do they have a chance at those What are your thoughts in terms of what that looks like for the Aggies, both on the men's and women's side for that matter?
Oh, I think they have a chance to definitely compete. Just what they've done in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, this is not something that's just happened this year. I mean, Howard's women's 4x4, a mile relay team. They have record-setting performances. You look at A&T's 4-mile relay team as well. They had the fastest team in the world, second time this season. So I expect both mile relay teams to perform exceptionally well. So I I expect some dramatic performances, and those are just the two that come to mind. I mean, the mile relay is probably one of the most exciting for those who ran track, or it's probably one of the most exciting also besides the 4x1. But you also have some individual folks, Cambria Sturgis as well. You expect her to compete as well as with the men. I mentioned the 4x4, but you have the what is it? The 200 meter dash 20.33, and I forget the young man's name, but that, if you're looking at Olympic times, that's Olympic times. So and we're talking NCAAs. So then you talk about the 4x1 where they had 10.02, 10.5 splits, and that wasn't even in our notes. So yeah, I expect them to complete big time. And this program has just made step change improvements over the years. And I'm just, what is Coach Ross's secret? What's the secret to the sauce?
I gotta ask him that. Yeah.
I'm serious, because they're competitive in so many events. It's you pick them out. They have freshmen. What's the freshman's name? Randolph Ross Jr. I mean, they have
son. Yeah.
Yes. So that are competing nationally. So do I expect them to compete? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he's gonna charge you for that secret sauce. Nobody gives that away for free. Charge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to we mentioned an individual, Cambria Sturgis. She ran one of the fastest qualifying times in the 100-meter quarterfinal, 10.92. That A&T men's 4x400 relay team. Oh man,
I was waiting for somebody to say
that's the one. That's the one. I'm really, I'm honed in on that one.
The mile relay, yeah.
Hey, they flying. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they can accumulate enough points with the track events to really make a dent within the NCAA nationals over the next couple of days and really, pull off some upsets. But for if your frame of reference is how our HBCUs stack up against these Power Fives, especially when we're taking a look at baseball season, we're always taking a look at how do teams do during midweek games. What A&T is doing is tremendous in terms of knocking off these teams that you hear constantly, whether it's the LSUs, the Arkansas, all these powerhouse track and field teams. So kudos to this A&T, and I'm looking forward to whenever we get an opportunity to talk to Coach Ross.
You're exactly right, and not that the West is a slouch, that you got folks coming out of California and Texas, but they came out of the East, which is belly of the SEC in terms of what that looks like. So they came out of the East representing. And to give you another example, I was on the call on Friday when they did the NCAA interviews. The 4 coaches they had during the interview were LSU head coach, USC head coach, happens to be a woman, and the Oregon head coach in terms of that. Both the USC, Southern Cal, and Oregon head coach were African-American. And then you had North Carolina A&T.
Yep.
Representing as the 4th coach. And so I got to ask a couple of questions. Steve Gaither was on there. So it's fascinating to get that information out. I'm still working to get a clip and see if I can put it on Instagram to do that. As we get ready to close here, to go with Mike, any final thought that you want to share in terms of the show as we close up?
No, just great to be back on. I've been on the road a couple of days and just great to be back in the saddle. You call this the lull period. I call this, the business analytics period. So I'm happy to get back in the saddle. So thanks a lot. Lots of good information. I look forward to speaking with Coach Ross again, though, personally, because incredible performance by North Carolina A&T track and field team.
No doubt about it. Great point. Charles, any final thoughts that you want to share?
Wanted to make sure I got this in there. U.S. Swimming Olympic Trials, Omaha, Nebraska. Miles Simon from Howard competing. So wanted to make sure I got that in, and hopefully he can get to Tokyo and perform. But I tell you what, like you said, business analytics part of it. I always enjoy this part of our HBCU season where we take these deep dives into the analytics of this, that, and the other sport, and really, open up, pull back the curtain, if you will, and really kind of understand what's going on.
No doubt. Great point when you talk about Howard. And as you said, he's right there. He's like 40 seconds off the bar in terms of the automatic qualification. So he's right there. So he has a serious chance to make a dent and make that trip. So kudos, as you said, thanks for bringing that up in terms of Howard. Kudos to the SID over at Howard University, making sure that he's getting that information out to folks. So that'll do it for us. One thing that I wanted to share before we jumped off of here is go check out mybcsn.net, mybcsn.net, to check out the HBC All-Star Game. It's been putting first class. They took the athletes out to the museum, historic Negro League Museum, with a lot of great information. They seem to be enjoying it. A lot of people are gathering up and wanting to see this showcase of these all-star players from the HBCU. So it sounds like this event is off to a great start. So well done by all involved. But my BCSN is streaming the game. So go check it out. Support these HBCU players out there. You can see the debut of our iScore StatCast by going to streaming partners and then HBCU All-Star Baseball. So check that out. Jump right over to mybcsn.net and you can get all that information as it moves forward. That'll do it for us. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. We went straight to YouTube. Let us know your thoughts on that. Mixing that in a little bit. You'll see us do that every so often to try to push some more people to YouTube and subscribe. We'll find a way to put it back on Facebook so you can check it out as well. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We hope you enjoyed our commentary as we did you a lot of the analytics, the business side of HBCU Sports. Let us know you enjoyed that. As we do that, make sure you take this number down. Guests can leave a message. Let us know how much you enjoyed the show. Let us know your thoughts in terms of Charles Bishop, Mike Washington, the professors, if you would, myself, the Dean of HBCU. Let us know that you enjoyed the show, your thoughts on it. You can call and leave a message at 678-459-4236. That's 678-459-4236. Just leave a quick message and we'll see about playing it back on the show for you. Also want to give an update for those that were looking for Coach Ross, North Carolina A&T men's and women's head track coach. He will be on next week as we look to interview him. The travel plans as they were preparing, obviously, for the track meet that starts tomorrow. The time allowance was not there, so we had to switch it up. So we're still working on that. Although we had it locked in, things happen, things change, but we'll get it done. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattacavil. Dream big. We'll continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles.
Of course.
Mike.
Lecture.
Dismiss.